Good morning. So yesterday, the AP Stylebook, the Associated Press Stylebook, tweeted, "We now say not to use the archaic and sexist term mistress for a woman in a long-term sexual relationship with and financially supported by a man who is married to someone else. Instead, use an alternative like companion or lover on first reference. Provide details later." Now, for whatever reason, this particular tweet got out of the little wheelhouse of the Associated Press and the denizens who follow them, all 32,000 people who follow the AP Stylebook, and it had somewhat of a splash. It got ratioed pretty heavily with like 7,000 comments and about 2,000 likes and about 360 shares, whatever. I think that a lot of people read into this particular tweet, first and foremost, a Orwellian sort of progress of, linguistic eugenics, which, a lot of people react to because we don't like it when people, authoritarians specifically, begin to mess around with language. Plus, it's a charged and or funny topic. It has to do with sexuality. It has to do with an illicit relationship. It's a very charged term, mistress is. And on one level of analysis, to get rid of that word and to get rid of, furthermore, the female connotations or the female specificity of that word is to, try to stamp out or to push underground an emergent phenomenon of the human experience, which would be a woman in a long-term sexual relationship with and financially supported by a man who is married to someone else. However, on another level of analysis, the AP Stylebook is specifically for the Associated Press, and the Associated Press is trying to guide language in a certain direction. If you scroll through their timeline just a little bit to May 4th, you will see that they are, proposing or, asserting that gendered language should not be used. For example, don't use fireman, use firefighter. Don't use mailman, use mail officer. I don't know the proper mailman term, but they're trying to create a language that is gender neutral, which on one level of analysis has to do with the representation of certain functions as not necessarily gendered. You don't have to be a man to deliver mail. You don't have to be a man to fight fires. You don't have to be a man to chair a board. And, making language a little bit more acceptable in that sense, it's kind of just a part of the direction that society and the people in society and the people in charge of society's language are trying to push the English language. And you can react to that, but it's just kind of common parlance at this point. The term man, and this is my problem with it, the term man is no longer just a neutral term, it is a gendered term, which causes us to wonder why men are seen as neutral and women are seen as particular. And is that neutrality of man necessarily a negative thing? I don't think so. I think that the particular power of the woman in old terms of gendering language was to allow the woman to be specific or to have a certain domain within the realm of feeling, of intimacy, and the connotations that include mistress. To call the word mistress sexist and archaic, though, is a sleight of hand. Archaic because the AP Stylebook is just saying that it's out of style, when maybe it's not. Now, if the AP Style Guide, or the AP, the Associated Press, wants to degender language, they can only go so far before they start to be unable to specify certain phenomena, because life in and of itself is not gender neutral. There's actually certain behaviors that manifest over and over and over again that pertain to the female and pertain to the male. When authoritarians or people who are in charge of sculpting language say that a term is off limits, the overarching thrust of that move is to try to change reality, to try to change perception of reality. But in certain instances, you don't edit reality when you edit your language. You only edit your ability to specify that reality. If the Associated Press wants to call mistress an archaic term, or to kind of suppose that it is not neutral in a sense, or neutral in the sense of clinical or sterile, then that is their purview. And I understand why the Associated Press would want to establish and promote a clinically clean, a very sanitized language. when dealing with unsanitary, messy things called life. But under what extent does that limit the power of the press to express and to investigate certain aspects of life? Related to this topic, and actually related to the last ramble that is both not impartial nor complete on the word cis, is the word Karen. Karen is another popular term that is being contested right now within the realm of Twitter, but it started off of Twitter specifically referring to entitled customers that retail employees would interact with, that demanding, rude customer that treats you as less than them and thinks that they have the authority to dictate how the business that they're partaking in should operate and should treat them specifically. Karen, like Boomer before it, leapt out of its particular use in subreddit. I don't actually know where Boomer came from, but Karen came from some sort of particular discourse and then in the realm of Twitter became an insult that was specifically targeted at white women. And in my timelines and the timelines that my timeline interacts with, I see a lot of specifically white women complaining about Karen as a racist and sexist term, but specifically as a sexist term and not so much a racist term. The question is why is it so easy to make a barb or to turn an insult personal with regards to females? Why is the term quote unquote cunt much more offensive than dick? Why is the word bitch much more demeaning or sounds more demeaning than, I guess, asshole does? It has to do most importantly with the emotional impact that that term has. And I believe Karen is eliciting a strong reaction specifically because it is being taken personal. It started as a general term, and the way that people are responding to it actually shows that the female, generally speaking, takes things personally. And not only that the female takes things personally, but that there is something about the female signifier that holds an emotional value that is kind of more or less absent with regards to the male signifiers. And you can see that replicated on the level of Karen, and you can see that replicated on the level of cunt, and I believe you can also see that replicated on the level of the mistress. For one reason or another, mistress holds an emotional value that is not there with the terms lover and companion. And insofar as that emotional value is present, or that connotation of illicitness and emotionality is present, the AP guidelines in trying to get away from it in the name of gender, they don't specify gender, but they do say it's sexist and archaic. Under that umbrella, they're actually trying to remove the aesthetic value or walk away from an aesthetic value. On one level, they are trying to edit language, or the language that they use and approve of within reportage, to remove different gender signifiers, and that is a political move. But with the term mistress, which has a specific gendered meaning, specifically, they even define it gendered in their tweet, that it means a woman in a long-term sexual relationship. And what I propose they're trying to do is not move away from mistress because it has a gendered value, but they're trying to move away from the word mistress because it has an aesthetic value that they find problematic. And it's obvious why. It's because it is filled with emotion and it is illicit. And it calls to mind a whole host of curiosities that go beyond straight reportage, that go into the domain of, I guess you would say, literature or character. And is the Associated Press no longer concerned with that domain of human experience? Insofar as they can report on something, how far can they strip that aspect of human experience from their language, specifically the romantic and the illicit and the tawdry? Of course, people are going to pay attention to the tawdry more than they're going to pay attention to the clinical or the absolutely sanitized and clean. So the good writer is going to figure out that the language that they can't use, they're going to have to replace with other forms of language to have the same effect, which would basically be interesting people in the story that they're trying to tell. However, at the end of the day, I went back to the etymology of mistress, and I do kind of agree that if we can decouple mistress from specifically a term for a woman in a long-term sexual relationship with and financially supported by a man who is married to someone else. If we can take that designation away, what you're left with is a female form of master. The mistress originally is just the female form for master, the mistress of the house, or a mistress of a certain domain, a mistress of X. And if you desexualize that, or if you take it away from the connotation of a kept woman, you're left with a word for female authority or a female authority figure. And I think that that is something that is very useful to preserve. And one wonders how that would be used in a non-derogatory sense or a non-romantic sense. And if women and men in conjunction would want to resurrect that word as a term for female mastery, insofar as there can be something as a female mastery, insofar as mastery is gendered, which is a whole other topic. I think that it is, but my domain and your domain might not overlap in all areas. So again, that is just a ramble. That is neither impartial nor complete. It's begging for people to expand and clarify my muddy and short-sighted points, and I invite that from you in the comments. This is Benjamin Boyce. I hope you guys have a good day. Okay, so because it's quarantine time, we're doing a puzzle, and that's where the cat has decided is her spot now, is where we do puzzles. I think it's an attention thing. It feels like a stage to her. She likes to be staged, but not like a princess or an actress, kind of more like a armada. She never fights. She just likes to be staged. Come on.